This operation is called facing, which is where you take the part and you put a nice square end on it, or you cut it down to length. I'm going to insert my part. I know that I'm only going to be cutting off this 1/4 of an inch right here. So I already marked it, and I'm putting it in the chuck so that I have most of my part held and just enough room to work with out here. The longer this part is sticking out, the more wobble it's going to have. So if I can hold it fairly close to the face of the chuck, that's ideal, but we don't want it too close, because if we hit the chuck with the tool, you'll have a really bad day. So my part's in there and it's tight, and I took this and I put it away. It's not in the jaw. And I've already marked all 6 sides of my part so that when it spins, I can see how far I need to cut. This is not a super accurate way to make this cut, but it's pretty dang good and good enough for what we were doing most of the time. So first I'm going to turn on the machine and then flip my red lever down. Now the tool is spinning, and I can run this over. I'm going to come over here to the top, to the very end of the part, touch it just a little bit, back it off, and then I can move it about 10 or 20 thousandths in. That's a pretty good cut. If you cut too much, you'll wear out the tool and it's bad for the part too. Just feed in real slowly. Every once in a while, give it a little break, and those chips will come right off. Now that I'm in the middle of the part, in the center, I can back it off a little bit and do it again. So now that I'm close to my mark that I made earlier, you can see it spinning there. I'm going to slow down a little bit and make smaller cuts. And you can see where the line is relative to the end of the part. And we're going to make it so that it meets. So I'm going to move my fine adjustment a little bit. Take off just a few thousandths. Maybe try another 5. I'm going to keep doing that until my line and the end of my part meet. And on this final pass, I'm going to go a little bit slower in and then pull the tool away and back it off. Push the brake. And that leaves a nicer surface finish on the edge. You don't have a bunch of little ridge marks on it. So that was the less accurate way to make this cut. Now I'm going to show you the more accurate way to do it. So again, I have my marks on there so I can see how far I need to cut. And that's just going to be a reference. I'm going to put this back in the jaw, in the chuck, tighten it. And what I'm going to do this time is use the fine adjustment over here, and I'll show you what that looks like up close in a minute. But we have to set that to a 0 point. So I'm going to back this off a little bit so that I have enough travel. I'm taking 150 thousandths off of there, so I want to make sure I have 150 thousandths worth of travel. Back this off, and I'm going to set the thousandths indicator to the 0 mark. So because there's backlash in this, I'm going to be setting the 0 point by pushing the tool holder towards the part until I get to 0, which is right there. And that's going to be my 0 point. And then what I'm going to do is take the coarse adjustment and bring it over so that the tip of the tool is just barely touching the part, but I'm going to do that while it's turned on. So you can see there's a little bit of a gap. I'm going to turn on the machine and use the coarse adjustment over here until it just barely touches the part, and you'll hear it and see a little bit of chips flying off. It's about 1/1000th. So I'm going to move this off to the side and do, let's say, 20 thousandths cut. So I'll move this over to 0.02. Back it off. Do another 20. So now I'm at 40 thousandths. So now I'm at 140 thousandths. And the last 10 thousandths right there. And I can back the tool away from the part and turn off the machine. So an up close look at this. When I set the backlash, this is my 0 mark. I'm going to go past it, pulling the tool holder away from the machine, going this way. And now I can run it up real slowly until I get to 0. And now I'm good. So now I've touched off the part with the coarse adjustment, and then I leave the coarse adjustment there. I can go 10 thousandths, 20 thousandths, 40, 60, 80, 100 thousandths, that's 0.1 inches. And this dial is a little bit tricky. So if I go to 120 thousandths, that's 0.12. But now I have 5 thousandths until I get to 0 again. So now I have to do a little bit of math. Or I can just keep counting and say this 5 is now 130, because that was 10 thousandths away. That was 10 tick marks. So that's 130, 140, 10 more tick marks, and my number was 150. So I'm going to do 10 more. It's 5, and that's 10. So now we're going to do some turning. In my example here, I'm using 1/2 inch hex. So from flat side is 1/2 inch, but I want it to be 3/8 of an inch round. So I'm going to take a little bit off until it's round, and 0.375 inches in diameter. And I'm going to do that 3/8 of an inch deep. And we can do that again with these adjustments that have the gradients on them, so we can measure. I'm going to come over and set this side. I've already set this dial to 0. Come over and touch the part just a little bit with the coarse adjustment. There we go. So now it's touching. I can pull this back. I'm going to turn this off and explain what I'm doing. So now I have this axis set and this dial is zeroed. And what I'm going to do is leave the coarse adjustment right there where it is and not touch it. I've already zeroed this so that the tip of the tool is barely touching the part. So that's my 0. I'm going to back this off a little bit so that when I run over here, the tip of the tool isn't touching the part. And I'm just going to cut off a little bit until I get a round surface, because I happen to know that when you take 1/2 inch hex down and make it round, it's still bigger than a 3/8, and that's going to be our starting point. Now it's hard to see when it's spinning, but this part still has parts of the flat on there, so we haven't gone deep enough yet. So I'm going to adjust. So now I'm going to adjust the fine adjustment in just a little bit further and do it again. And now I'm going to back this off all the way and turn off the machine. So now I'm going to leave this fine adjustment where it is and not touch it. And I've already set the backlash on it because I was rotating it clockwise. I was pushing the tool holder in, which is the direction I'm going to be going later. There's a little nut on here, and I can adjust this around to 0 and very carefully lock that in place, just enough. So now I'm going to take some calipers and measure this part and see how big it is right now. It is 0.48. It moved a little bit when I moved it away. 0.48. So now I can do a little bit of math. Get my calculator here and say 0.48, which is the current diameter of the part, minus 0.375, which is what I want it to be. 105 thousandths is how much I need to cut. Now the dial on the side measures in thousandths, but when it's displayed, it's actually measuring the diameter of the part. So every tick mark only moves this tool a half a thousandth in because of how radii and diameters work. The tool only moves half a thousandth, but the diameter of the part gets smaller by 1,000th. So the gradients on the machine take care of that for you. And I'm going to do this probably 10 thousandths, 20 thousandths at a time. That's a decent depth of cut for this. So let me go ahead and show you some math. I told you that the indicator here goes all the way around and it ends at 125. Since I'm going 3/8 of an inch in and 0.125 is 1/8, I need to turn this 3 times to do my final cut. And I've already set this side to 0 as well. And we decided that we need to go in 105 thousandths. So I'll be measuring that and measuring this. So I'll be moving this adjustment in about 10 or 20 thousandths each time to cut. And I'll be moving this 3 full rotations to do that 3/8 depth of cut. So now I'm at 100, and after this cut, I'll need to take away another 5 thousandths. It's always a good idea to stop and double check your work. So let's measure this. I am at 0.38 now, and I want it to be 0.375, so that matches up. So now I can go another 5 thousandths in that direction, and this will be my final pass. So I'm going to try and do it as smoothly as I can. And when I get to the very end of my cut this way, I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to pull the tool out this direction, and then I'll make that final cut on this surface. Remember, this has a 5-degree angle of relief on it. So there's actually 5-degree angle pointed that way, and I want to get rid of that. I want it to be as flat as possible and only leave the radius of the tool in the corner. There we go. That was the final pass. So now I can measure this again. And I am at 0.375 and a half. Just a little bit big. I probably measured it wrong initially, so I'm off by just that little bit. So the way we can fix that is by going back to where we were, 105, and just move it ever so slightly past the tick mark. We're just going to take a little tiny bit off and run it one more time. So now my part is 0.374 and a half, so I took off 1,000th in total, and that is totally within spec. So I changed the part in here, but remember I had this fine adjustment travel set so that I had enough depth to go in. You do have to be careful that when you're moving the tool in, that this side here doesn't touch the jaws. So if I move it in too close, you can see I'm going to hit that part. I don't want that. So I need to move the whole carriage over and move my fine adjustment in far enough that I can still do my whole travel, but not have that part of the carriage contacting the jaws. If those hit the carriage, you'll have a real bad day.